One office in Washington learned to decide everything a sprawling military once argued about for years.
And today, we ask whether that convenience was ever worth what it quietly cost a free people.
Convenience built an entire century of results, Alexis. Results your townships were never quite fast enough to match.
Results are not the same thing as liberty, Niccolo, and today I intend to prove exactly that difference.
This conversation is brought to you by philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss.
Created by AITalkerapp.com, create your own animated conversations. Link in the description.
Alexis, I have been reading about an American Secretary of Defense who took an entire military bureaucracy scattered across 3 proud services and folded it into a single obedient will. I confess a certain professional admiration.
Of course you do. You have never once met a concentration of power you did not want to compliment on its posture.
This man, McNamara, built something called the Planning, Programming, Budgeting System and staffed an Office of Systems Analysis with sharp young men who could override any general's request simply by running better numbers than the general could produce.
For anyone who does not immediately see the danger in that sentence, let me explain plainly. Before this system, an army general, a navy admiral, and an air force general each argued their own case for resources, loudly, separately, and imperfectly. Afterward, one office in Washington decided everything, using arithmetic nobody outside that office was equipped to challenge.
Precisely and beautifully efficient. A prince who allows every subordinate lord to argue endlessly over resources gets nothing but noise and delay. A prince who centralizes the decision gets clarity, speed, and a single throat to choke if something goes wrong.
A single throat to choke is a lovely phrase for a single mind now capable of misjudging an entire nation's defense without a single rival voice loud enough to be heard in time.
Every structure has that risk, Alexis, even your beloved little townships and associations. The question is never whether power can be misused, since power can always be misused. The question is, which arrangement gets the most done before the misuse arrives?
That is precisely the seduction I have spent my life warning against. The idea that centralized efficiency is simply a neutral tool waiting to be used well or badly. I call the danger soft despotism, a government so accommodating, so competent, so willing to manage every detail of a citizen's welfare that the citizen quietly stops bothering to manage anything himself.
Let me steelman that properly, Alexis. Purely so I may enjoy dismantling it with a clear conscience afterward. Your claim is that a state which centralizes too much administrative competence eventually produces a population too comfortable and too disconnected from local self-government to notice its own liberty quietly dissolving.
That is almost exactly my claim, which I find slightly more unsettling coming from you than from myself.
I am capable of understanding an argument perfectly while still finding it useless in practice. A general who loses a war because 17 committees argued for 6 months has not preserved anyone's liberty. He has simply lost more slowly and with better manners.
Allow me to return the same courtesy and summarize you. Purely so, I may enjoy watching you squirm slightly under an accurate description. You believe a single centralized mind, sufficiently intelligent and sufficiently ruthless, can outperform any diffuse collection of local judgments, and that liberty is a luxury a serious state can only afford after security has been guaranteed by exactly that kind of mind.
An excellent summary, and I notice you resisted the urge to call it evil even once.
I am saving that word, Niccolo, for a moment when it will actually surprise you.
I look forward to being surprised by a man who has predicted my entire personality accurately from the very first sentence he spoke to me.
I resisted it for exactly one sentence. It is not evil, Niccolo. It is worse than evil, because it arrives smiling, with excellent paperwork, and citizens vote to expand it themselves.
McNamara's whiz kids, as the newspapers called them, were not tyrants. Alexis, they were simply better accountants than the generals they replaced.
A better accountant who now controls every dollar and every decision in a military of millions is no longer merely an accountant. He has become the actual government of the institution, unelected, unchecked, and answerable only to a single office at the very top.
Unchecked is a strong word for a man who still answered to a president and a Congress.
A president and a Congress who lack the technical fluency to challenge his numbers are not a check, they are an audience.
Let me offer you a concrete case, since you enjoy specifics almost as much as you enjoy alarm. Before this reform, the Army wanted one bomber, the Air Force wanted a different bomber, and the Navy wanted a third bomber entirely, and each service lobbied Congress separately for years, wasting money and time that a single centralized decision could have saved in an afternoon.
And who decided which bomber was correct, Niccolo? Was it a general who had flown a mission, or a young analyst with a slide rule who had never once left Washington?
The analyst, more often than not, and I fail to see why that should trouble anyone. Expertise is not required to have flown the plane, only to understand the numbers governing its usefulness.
There is the entire danger stated in a single, careless sentence. You have just told me that a man who has never faced the consequences of a decision is nonetheless the correct person to make it, provided his arithmetic is tidy enough.
A surgeon need not have suffered the disease to cure it competently, Alexis. Why should a defense analyst require different qualifications entirely?
Because a disease does not organize itself into a chain of command with its own loyalties, its own memory, and its own capacity to resist a diagnosis, it finds humiliating. You are not treating tissue, Niccolo. You are treating men. And men who feel unheard eventually stop reporting honestly to the very system meant to help them.
That is a management problem, easily solved with better incentives, not a fundamental flaw in centralizing the decision itself.
I have heard that same phrase, a management problem easily solved, applied to nearly every catastrophe centralization has ever produced. It is never the structure's fault in the moment, only ever a fixable detail, right up until the details accumulate into something no longer fixable at all.
You would prefer the old chaos, then. 3 services fighting each other publicly for a decade, while the actual threat outside the country grows undisturbed by any of it.
I would prefer a state strong enough to defend itself without first hollowing out every local judgment capable of noticing when that same strength has begun serving itself, rather than the citizens who paid for it.
You describe efficiency as though it were original sin.
I describe it as the most comfortable road to the same old chains.
A state that cannot organize itself, cannot defend itself either.
A state that organizes itself, that completely has already stopped being free.
Freedom has never once won a war by itself, Alexis.
Neither has a spreadsheet, Niccolo, whatever you keep telling yourself.
Well, that grew rather warmer than I intended this early in the series.
Warmth is simply what happens when I finally say what I actually think about men like you.
If you enjoyed watching me remain almost entirely composed under obviously biased attack, the efficient thing to do is like this video immediately.
Or subscribe simply to watch whether his composure survives contact with the actual consequences still to come.
My composure has survived worse men than you, Alexis, wrapped in far better arguments.
Your composure has survived because nobody has yet handed you the bill for what your centralized clarity actually cost.
Subscribe regardless, if only to see him discover that some bills are worth paying.
Subscribe regardless, and watch the second part, where his beloved office grows large enough to swallow an entire bank.